My troubling childhood. My life wasn't the best since I was a child, because I watched my parents fight almost every day. Many of these fights ended with my mother calling the police and my father going to jail for the weekend. In addition to the other problems, I had to watch my mother using the wrong substances to try to escape the reality she lived in. An arranged marriage because of an unwanted pregnancy, they made a point of talking about it every time they fought. Although he sometimes said he didn't want to have children, my old man always caught my attention, not because he was a jerk or a bad example of a family man. It was his strange behavior. Many times, when the house was already very dark, and he thought everyone was asleep, he would come home with some volumes that he carried on his back and took to the attic. This is the interesting part. I spent my childhood, until my teenage years, just before I turned 18 and lived with my aunt and uncle, believing that my father was a psychopath. You might ask yourself, how can a child have such things in his head, thinking that his own creator is something so horrible? Well, since I was a child, I always had access to the internet and I really liked watching and reading content about serial killers. That fascinated me and made me excited for someone so young. According to some profiles, my father fit into some of them, a guy with signs of serious mental problems. He suffered abuse from his own parents, the smell of rot coming from the attic, and this was always ignored by my mother, and on top of that, he hit his face with that and took things to the attic almost every week, which left a terrible smell in our house. Other facts about my father deserve more attention. These were quite exotic. I imagine that any other child would be scared if they were in my shoes at that time, for example. My father used to put on a clown mask every night when he showed up with those things inside the house. That's what closed my idea that he was a serial killer, creating a character, or using that scary face to avoid being identified. Sometimes, when my father wanted to attack my mother, he would wear that mask, driving my mother even closer to madness. To quote once again, he never attacked me, never touched me or did anything to me, however he would look at me. In his eyes, perhaps feeling the same thing that I felt, emptiness. The old man always noticed that I wasn't afraid, I just accepted the situation I was living in. Yes, that's what I went through when I lived in my old house. I'm almost finishing my physical education degree, and my uncles told me that my father died of unknown causes. I think it's been about 2 years since my mother passed away. When my old man died, I was a little sad, because, despite everything, my father was never aggressive towards me, and he mistreated my mother as if she were just another woman. The mystery was in my head. What had my father been keeping in the attic all this time? I remember that some acquaintances and even my childhood friends disappeared when I was still living with my parents. I didn't intend to talk about this peculiar detail, but it is part of my story. At that time, I asked to stay in the basement, since I couldn't hear my mother crying or my father making strange noises in the attic every week. I know you want to know about the disappearances, right? Well, the first person I remember was my best friend, who had strange behavior. A little effeminate. My father didn't approve of our friendship, thinking that I would turn into a little girl, and within a few days he disappeared. My teacher also disappeared, the one who was always on my case because I gave half a grade and failed me in some subjects. The noisy neighbor, Mrs. Yasmin, used to listen to the TV loudly and wouldn't let me sleep. Was that also the reason for my disappearance? The last person, if I'm not mistaken, who disappeared, it was my father's ex-girlfriend. The one who cheated on him, and whenever the old man was attacking my mother, he treated her as if she were his old girlfriend, calling my mother by the name of his ex. When I asked my father what he thought about the mysterious disappearances, he would smile and constantly say that they were silly things, that no one would miss them. I would just agree, with a smile on my face, and look at my old father, with the same haggard look looking at me. As I said, it had been a short time since my father had died, and all that time, I had never gone into the attic to find out what he was doing there. I arrived at my old house and went towards the attic, which was locked. I took the keys and went in. I found a bizarre place. It was full of animal bodies, dogs, deer, and even baby cows. I recognized all the skeletons. There was an old computer in the place. I thought the rotten smell was from the bodies of victims of my possible serial killer father. But no. The computer had no secret key to open. I found several files involving necrophilia and bestiality. My father recorded videos that were shared on the internet, violating those bodies, which he took to the attic. That was the old man's secret. It's a little frustrating. I thought I could identify with my father in some way, But that figure full of ministries was nothing more than a pervert with bizarre tastes. I didn't intend to stay in my house for long when I got here. My intention was to satisfy my curiosity and nostalgia for the place, despite my disturbing childhood. I decided to go back to where I slept, in the basement. I felt a strong melancholy when I got there. My bed was in the same place, the pillow and the teddy bear, the wardrobe and the magazines of naked women, among other things of a teenager my age at the time. When I stepped on the floor, I felt that soft earth and noticed in each place where I buried the people I killed. My best friend, in the corner on the right. My teacher, next to my bed. My neighbor, the little girl from the house a little further away, buried under the rug where I did my schoolwork. I slept every day looking at those shallow graves, feeling special and powerful. On second thought, I think I'll stay in my old house, and I also believe that several other bodies have made my room as cozy as it was in my childhood. On the balcony of the building. I chose the tallest building in the city, where I could be sure that, once I climbed the part that cut through the sky, no one would stop me. A well-dressed man in a business setting would be just another employee going unnoticed. No one was concerned when I entered through the front door, looked for the elevator and went up with the others. They didn't even look me in the eye and notice how disconcerted I was. I left right away, entered the office above the others, placed a chair behind me at the door, making it impossible for anyone to enter easily, and opened the window. That's when I approached the balcony and the wind tried to push me inside, as strong as a storm, but I was empty for a long time. I examined the movements below, and everyone looked like ants. Everything was going easier than I imagined. I put my first foot in, the other was dragged right after. The sun wasn't as hot as I worried. Things kept bubbling in my mind. Then I heard a voice inside the room. Don't move anymore. I know you're a good person and you don't need to do this. Please listen to me. I tried to look and there was no one nearby, but the voice was there and it made me a little anxious. I didn't want everything to end like crazy, because I knew very well what I was doing. I don't need to. Why not? Who are you? And stop hiding. I put my second foot inside the office when the wind got a little stronger and a cluster of ants was pointing upwards, and I could hear a whirlwind of voices spreading from below. I was sure that no one was there when I locked the door, but a well-dressed man appeared. He was certainly responsible for this building, a guy with cold eyes, expressing calm and patience. It wasn't the first time he was dealing with extreme situations. His concern about the situation was quite clear. He raised his hands and seemed to control my nerves in the way he tried to ease what I was going through. On the other hand, that tone kept shaking and communicating as if it were a low megaphone. I can't see sad people doing stupid things, he said, with so much distress and disgust on his face that it left me a little moved. I put my other foot inside, but when he realized I was far away, I went back to the balcony again, and he stopped walking toward me. His slow, calculating manner interrupted the way he was crawling his body toward me. When I returned to the window, it was no longer blowing, and police cars were on the sidewalk. The door began to rattle far away from us, and he resorted to talking about my children and my wife, staring at the ring on my finger and saying that people needed me, despite the bad times. I had everything anyone dreams of in life: a good job, healthy and exemplary children, a dedicated wife who loved me. Watching his words, I felt terrible, as if I had never appreciated everything I had in life, which was enough, and was just complaining. I know that advice can't always fill the void someone has inside their soul. There is something absorbing all the good, and this time the man was in the middle, much closer than before, in his invasive way of crawling, with his eye sockets almost tearing in despair, saying that he had seen all kinds of bad things and could not let a good person do such a disgrace. The way he said it seemed like he knew me perhaps better than I knew myself. Despite this guy's efforts, I was ready. It was great to create hope, to hear words from someone who cared about my feelings and tried to know what I was going through and what was tormenting me at the moment. When he realized that almost my entire body was outside the office, he explained that he would prove it, voices screaming in his throat apparently in his last remaining effort. He asked me to close my eyes for a second. He said that it was the only thing he wanted from me. Feeling compassion for his frustrating desperation, I did so. Whatever this man had been through. His words were as if he were the best psychiatrist in the world, and he tried to say how much my family would be lost after I did this. My wife wouldn't get over it. My relatives wouldn't be able to handle it. and I would lose everything I had built. The people downstairs, growing, children shaken and not understanding, adults coming home from their jobs. It would be a trauma to see a body destroyed on the sidewalk. It could create, in the darkness of the mind, terrifying things that my wrong choice would cause in the lives of others, a shocking and true terror. The chair, I could no longer bear the attacks from the other side, and, before the door was broken down by other people worried about me, that man saved me. I could see more clearly in my mind every day that my partner welcomed me with a smile and said she loved me, my children, Naomi and Akemi, called me daddy and told me how important I was. Even my relatives always welcomed me well, despite my emotional problems. There's no point in destroying their lives, and he, clapping his hands and saying how well I did, kept following me, noticing how far I was moving away from the window. Why do this if I don't even have enemies? I had nothing to complain about. I knew I could get treatment. I was finally out of the window, and the only thing I could do was be thankful because the terror, where it doesn't exist, was created only by my stupid mind. I've never felt so good about myself. I turned my back, taking a deep breath and feeling confident. The first time in my life that I was truly happy and relieved to be thankful for the effort someone had made and tried to see me well, fighting fiercely every second. A man who in less than seconds was close to my face, almost kissing me on the mouth. Now excited, looking in my direction and pushing me with his hand. Seconds before I was far enough away, he whistled these words, my face seeing the balcony getting further away and the noises below screaming in sync getting closer. It's not funny when you're sad. For more stories like this, follow the channel Hunter of Darkness. Don't forget to like and leave your comment.